Welcome to Business Talk Sister Talk. I'm Becca.
And I'm Ruthie.
And today we get the opportunity to speak to someone super awesome. And the title of our episode is How to Build a Business That You Believe In. We have Keith Turner with us from The Promise Is You, and he is going to tell us all about what he does and all of that. Just for context, everybody, I've been following Keith a little bit in his journey through this semi-recently, not as far back as he started off, but we're going to hear a lot about that today. So thanks so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you, Becca. Thank you, Ruthie, for having me today. I am really excited to have the opportunity to have a conversation with you this afternoon.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Yeah. So our first question for you is, what do you do?
What do I do? So my business partner and I, Carl Crawford, started a consulting business, and our main focus was more towards athletics and athletic teams. And if the folks out there know what the VALA Act is, Violence Against Women's Act, we were talking to mostly student athletes, male and female, about dating violence and appropriate behavior on campus and off campus, and just knowing when no means no. So that's kind of where we started, and then that has spun off into some things that we are really passionate about, as diversity and inclusion and equal justice.
Yeah, and how did you get started with that? Like, what was your passion driving that?
So most of it is because I have two daughters, and Carl has one daughter, and it was knowing that our daughters are out, in that age of dating and getting to know partners, and just really wanted to try to educate young people. And both of us have coached collegiately and high school wise, and my passion of coaching college football for over 30 years really drove me to really keep educating young people on this topic. So.
Wow. So you mentioned you guys have kind of started there. How do you do what you do? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So what we do is a lot of times folks will reach out to us, or we've been reaching out to different colleges and high schools and different organizations. And what we do is we try to come in and not do that one-time feel where what we call you get a hat and a T-shirt and you check a box. We try to do a progressive where we go in and we really try to get a connection and get students to understand that we're there not for a one-time service. We're there, to continuously help them educate them on these different topics. And so we try to make sure we go in, we give a presentation. Most of the time, our presentations are 2.5 to 3 hours, and then we do a follow-up within the next 6 to 8 weeks with those same athletic teams or the different organizations we're working with. And then we do another deep dive of how is that going to change your organization, change your dynamics of your sports team, and then what are you putting together as far as your strategic plan and looking at your mission moving forward.
Wow. That all sounds really intimidating. So, obviously this is a huge issue, and I can really hear your heart and not just wanting that for the world, but specifically for your family too, and kind of implementing that and teaching people about that. So when you look at a big problem like violence in a broad term, how do you know where to start? Like, what was your first okay, this is what our first step is going to be to fight this?
So one of the main things was going back off of our past history. So I have some experience with, like I said before, coaching college football, and Carl coaching high school basketball and college basketball. We went back off of our experience working with different situations that have come up. So along with that, going, okay, what could we have done or have talked about to try to prevent this from happening to some of these student athletes, and what are the precautions we could have coaches, counselors, and even faculty members take to help these young men and young women through it. So that was kind of our starting point of understanding exactly where we were at as far as you know, our past experiences, and then moving from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Ruthie.
Who was your first audience? Like, you were like, okay, we're going to move forward with this. And then who did you kind of approach first?
So our first audience were some coaches that I knew. If you've been in athletics, the coaching field is a really tight network. So I just reached out to some of my former colleagues and said, hey, these are the things that we want to talk to not only your staff about, but then move into your teams. And a lot of it was because I worked in rural Minnesota in the 2-year system, talked to the coaches about, okay, who are you recruiting? What does that look like for them, especially if they're students of color or if they're coming from a metropolitan area? What does that look like coming into a community that may only have 5,000, a 5,000 population for them? And then how do you want them to get acclimated to not only college, but living on their own in a rural community? So those were some of the main things that I don't want to say sold, or what we told them that we would help them with. Yeah.
And I know from previous conversations that we've had, and Ruthie, this is the first time Ruthie's meeting you, so she's not
nice to meet you.
Like, there's lots of stuff going on in this, and Keith has so many cool things that he's doing. It's so exciting. And one of the things that I think that really stuck out to me in what you have mentioned is you're seeing like this concept of come to school to get a degree, not a felony. And I never even thought of that before. I was like, that's a thing. And can you just speak to that and what that looks like and how you guys are really trying to address that issue? Because I think that that's a huge, huge problem that a lot of people aren't even aware of.
Yeah. So Carl, so I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and Carl's originally from South Central Los Angeles. And we talked about, okay, what does that look like when we came out of our communities and came to college? And we wanted to educate young men and women on that, because when they get into some of these communities, not knowing some of the past history and the backgrounds, you could get caught up in some different things that would give you a felony, and hence came out of the title of our company, The Promise Is You. We always said the promise was us, because we went to college and our family were looking for us to be successful. That's why they were helping us move forward, because we understand too that when a young person comes to college, it's not just them, it's their parents, their grandparents, and sometimes their siblings who are really helping support them and pushing them forward to make sure that they graduate and they gain the skills that they want to get into their profession. So making sure that we talk to young people and let them know, that one mistake of using drugs, or maybe even selling drugs, or one night of drinking, and understanding that no means no, and both of you are intoxicated, can change your whole career path and essentially change your whole life in just a few hours.
Wow. Yeah, so you're seeing this problem on a small scale and a big scale on an individual basis, and um wow, yeah. And I just keep thinking like, how did you, it's just like just hearing your heart in that, and like in all of where you're at now, how did you network? How did you do the research? How did you decide like, okay, consulting is where we're going to go with this? So yeah, kind of touch on those things. Like, what did your networking look like? Who did you reach out to first in your researching process?
So when we started them, we we went to a lot of different, I guess you would say, trainings that folks were putting on, and we saw what we liked. We took what we liked and what we didn't like, and we weren't stealing their content, but we were looking at how presenters present it. And if it was just what we talk about as talking heads, and we're going to talk to you for 2.5 hours, and then you're going to leave and go, you're trained and ready to go. It was like, no, we want people to be interactive. We want them to share their stories with each other, because most of the folks that are in our training are folks that have worked together for several years, and they have no idea of what each other backgrounds are. For example, we just did a training for NERC, and we had 50 participants in there, and after we were done, all hands went up, because our final question was, did you learn anything today about your coworkers? And every hand went up in the audience, and it was just like, here it is. Some of these people have been working together for 10, 15 years, and they're just finding out, different things about their coworkers.
Yeah. So, okay, it sounds like I'm just going to break down your process, because Ruthie is somebody that's all about, logistics, how do people start a movement themselves towards what they believe in and they see a problem with. So I'm just going to break down the steps it sounds like you took so far. You saw a problem. You started asking about, how can we make sure this doesn't happen? You started networking, researching, and then you came up with some content or discussion topics and presentation material to address that problem. And then this kind of launched you and your presentations into a full-blown business, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say too, just to expand on that. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Clery Act. So
No,
the Clery Act is something that was evolved from a young lady that was murdered on the East Coast at a university, and her parents had no idea that there was such a high crime rate on this campus. So they really lobbied for colleges to have to report what criminal activity and different things that are happening, because this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. So this was a training that I went to in the early 2000s, and I was just like blown away of how much sexual assault and criminal activities happen on college campuses. So that was probably one of the main things that sparked Carl and I. And then we came back and we talked about it, and then we went to the different trainings. So I see where your question is at. So our process was finding out unbelievable and I had been in higher ed at that time for over 20 years, and I was just like, holy smokes, you don't see it, but it is happening.
So you're convicted by data, a man after my own heart.
Becca's really into data.
Oh, I know that. And then having that conversation with our faculty staff, they were not truly aware of it either. And then that sparked some interesting conversations. And then if you saw where a lot of these universities were getting fined throughout the country for false reporting, is another thing that really spearheaded or sparked us to really drive some of this information home, and want to keep our focus at the collegiate level.
Yeah. So you said that you were in that training with Carl specifically. Was he a good, I guess, so sometimes it's really easy to get really overwhelmed with all the different things on trying to do it yourself. So speak to that about how beneficial it was to have someone kind of a partner in crime or partner in fighting crime, I guess, to just walk through that process with you and encourage you in that. Like, what was that like?
So it was interesting because the training was a 5-day training, and it was 8 hours a day, and it is very, very overwhelming.
That is intense.
It is, and what you're doing is, if you have a partner in fighting crime, you're going, okay, you focus on this part, I'll focus on this part, and then we'll get back together at the end, because there's no way you can truly educate yourself in 8 hours sometimes, because you just lose focus on things. And so that was probably the most beneficial thing, is making sure that we were able to capture everything that we were getting within those 5 days.
So another question I have for you is, along with that, if you're saying, yeah, working with a partner, you divide and conquer, that's totally going to be effective. What are some key things that you would recommend to someone who's interested in starting this type of business?
One of I'd say the number one thing is understanding the content, and then understanding your audience, because we are really aware, and we addressed this in the beginning, because you don't know your audience until you get there, and you don't know what their past is, and we talk about some tough topics, and we let them know right away, if you have had trauma, or if you've had some things that have affected you in the past, please feel comfortable getting up and leaving, and we will help you walk through that at that point in time. But we want to make sure that people feel comfortable about the tough conversations we're getting ready to have, and then that we are sensitive to the different traumas or things that have happened to people in the past. So the number one thing would be knowing your content, and then giving factual information, not just running off the cuff, and then knowing your audience.
Okay, go ahead, Ruthie.
So what resources would you recommend to someone who's interested in this topic specifically?
The biggest, try to stay off the internet. And I say that, but you know what I mean, because a lot of times there's some things out there. But actually, if you're looking at this kind of content, is going to, if you have access to a local college or university, getting on their campus and talking to, as far as the Cleary stuff, talking to their campus security, talking to their safety officer, and then moving forward into the educational part, talking to the different deans of students and deans of education.
Okay, so I feel like today we have totally gotten a little bit of a history lesson in the same, in all of it, because through this, when you're like, yeah, this happened in this time frame, and there wasn't this, and I'm like, oh, that's why they have those stickers on the bathroom doors of all the bathrooms in the women's room or whatever. Like, oh yeah, like they're really focused on reporting things and all this stuff. But I can see how that over time, if that's where it started and nobody knew, and then it just becomes like something that needs to be a serious issue that's addressed, and boom, you have so much change. And that was actually a question that we didn't even get to, was about how much change have you seen in your lifetime. But so in speaking about history with this, and we're going to transition into our Gawk portion,
I'm bummed. There's so much here. It just we're running short on time, but
I know, and you guys need to definitely follow Keith because the Promise Is You. They have an Instagram. Just heard about it, so we're excited.
their handle is The Promise Is You, and then if you look at like the owner of it, it's Keith and Carl. So if you guys want to follow him, he's super awesome.
Yeah, and so as we were talking about just like history or of our lives or whatever, because you know how we always have an embarrassing story about something, you know, we're like, Keith, tell us a little bit about your life. Do you want to talk about something ridiculous? And we went through a whole bunch of different things, and I was like, so what was it like to have your first child? Because I know Keith has a couple kids or whatever, and he okay. I laughed so hard. I'm just gonna quote you because I don't think this is gonna be recreated, but he literally said, "Yeah, we had our first child and then got rid of our beagle."
So we treated our beagle like a dog, or we treat our beagle like a baby, and then when we got a baby, we kicked out the beagle.
We really didn't kick him out. We let him. He probably had a better home with my father-in-law because he fed him table food all the time. He went from a normal size to probably 20 pounds overweight.
Oh.
Wow.
We had a dog named Jasmine that we called, I always called her a little propane tank with legs.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about, you were telling us about the most frustrating experience you had with that dog, and we just need to like hear about it.
I'll tell you. So the dog's name, I named him after Michael Jordan, the basketball player. So his name was Mike, and Mike I would always take him for a walk, but this one day in the winter he got off his leash, and I don't know if you've ever been in the Jubilee parking lot in Chisholm. I lived above an apartment building back there, and he got off his leash and he's running, but he would let me get within like 2 to 3 feet of him, and like I was gonna catch him, and then he'd take off again. But anyway, at this point in time, the parking lot is full. People are laughing. There's snow everywhere. And I'm going, I got to catch this dog before he gets hit by a car. My wife is dying laughing, looking from the top of the steps, and it never failed. He'd let me get just enough, and then he'd run away. But this went on for probably about 45 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
And then he finally had enough, and I didn't catch him. He just ran right up the steps to my wife and went in. And I was just like, you have to be kidding me.
I have a feeling that this happened before there was a lot of people standing there live streaming you to the internet.
Yeah, there wasn't. Yeah, thank God there wasn't a bunch of cell phone cameras. So.
Document it forever.
Yeah.
Too bad though. You could add that to your Instagram.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have wanted that because it probably wasn't a pretty picture on my part.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys like this episode, you should totally follow us on Instagram or Facebook page. And if you have a question for us or for Keith, feel free to reach out to our email on our website, businesstalksistergawk.com. See you next week.